and welcome to the first of our Edinburgh Fringe 2024 compilation podcasts. On this podcast, I'll be talking to Guy Woods about Puddles and Amazons, Barton Williams and Andrew Eaton-Lewis about Precious Cargo, Ian McKechnie and Jose Rojas about The Other, and Sean Y. Queng about A History of Fortune Cookies. But first, I caught up with Luca Rutherford to hear about her show, You Heard Me, and I should say that Luca gives some warnings about some of the things under discussion, not only in the show, but in our conversation, so do look out for those. And I'm joined now by theatre maker, writer and artist Luca Rutherford to hear about You Heard Me, which will be on at Zoo Southside at 4:30 p.m. between the 20th and the 25th of August. Hello, Luca.
Hello. It's very nice to be here with you.
Well, it's great that you could join us. Tell us all about You Heard Me. Very simple question to start, which probably isn't simple at all.
No, it's a great question to start with. So I'm going to start with what it feels like and what the form of the piece is. So it's one person on stage. It's just me on stage, but it has been made with a big, beautiful team who I adore. And you can kind of really tell that when you're watching the show, when you're seeing the show, because the lighting and the sound is super, super integrated. And I know that might seem kind of strange because in most live performance, there will be integrated sound and lights.
Sure.
But we've kind of taken it to the next level. So there's at all points, the lights and the sound and me are kind of in this play together. It is super, super dynamic. So the setup is like an arena. There's booms, so big poles with four, I actually forget the technical term. I think it's parkans on each boom, but it creates this arena-like setup, and that's split between the lighting designer and designer Bethany Gutwell and Bethany Wells have created this space that can either be super, super expansive or actually quite claustrophobic. And there's just loads of lights at all points, and they're kind of at times friendly, at times foe. And then we have this super, super intricate sound world and sound score, this sonic universe that Melanie Wilson crafted. And that is a mix and a mashup of, at the very beginning of the show, you'll see me, I'll come and talk to you, not as myself, but a heightened version of myself. But then you'll hear an audio recording. And I can tell you a bit about that in a moment, but that audio recording has then been taken, blasted apart, mishmashed back together with a whole many different textures of sound that you then hear on a big chunk, like a 25-minute stretch, which is also at that time when you hear it, I'm doing loads and loads of physicality. So hopefully that's a bit of a more insight into like what I mean by integrated sound and lights, but there's always my physicality, the lighting and the sound at play at any one time. So formally, I think it's quite interesting, which is a silly word. What I mean by interesting is it's quite experimental in terms of a one-person show, that it's not just me moving or me doing direct address or me kind of in this monologue, but it's super expansive and goes all over the place. And we can only really get there because the sound encompasses the audience or makes us really expansive, and the lighting kind of does the same. We kind of go small and then go really big.
So it sounds like for an audience member, it's quite an experience, kind of experiential. You're being kind of, I wouldn't use the word bombarded, but certainly, kind of, there's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it's super, super visceral. Mm-hmm. So, and what's really exciting about being at Zoo Southside is we're in the main stage, which is super big. So that works perfectly for the show, because it means that an audience member, you can kind of sit back and watch it all happen whilst the sound is around you. Or if you choose, you can kind of lean in and try and get in a more intimate way of being with it. But that's not possible when you're in a smaller space. When you're in a smaller space, I think at times when we deliberately make it feel claustrophobic, it is quite claustrophobic for an audience. Yeah. But Zoo Southside, we don't really have that, which I'm really excited for.
So
as
you've
well.
the play has been on elsewhere.
Yeah.
It's been on, and what was the? This is going to sound like a silly question, I'm sure, but
Oh,
how do the audience? How important are the audience then in such a show like that? And do they change it when it, is it kind of different every night almost?
this is fascinating to me. I mean, it's always different every night because I know I always get a bit wary when you start using the word energy because it can mean lots of different things to everyone, but the vibe, the feel of the audience changes totally how it's going to be.
Right.
But the piece is so kind of set in the rigor of what it is and the tasks for me that I have to do on stage that fundamentally it never really changes. But there's something you can't quite put your fingers on. It definitely changes a lot because, at the start of the show, I'm behind. We have a content warning at the beginning of the show, which is a recording of me speaking directly to the audience, also talking about access and how it's relaxed. So letting everyone hopefully feel safe and comfortable. But immediately, if there's a big, like, lots of people are chatting, people are really into it, and that before the audio, I'm like, okay, we're here for a good time. If the audience is really quiet, that might also be a totally different, everyone's really super engaged, but I never really know. I'm just there behind the curtains like, how are we gonna do this? How's it gonna go? But I would say with other work that I do, I'm normally super responsive, as in like if someone sneezes, I'll say, oh, bless you. Or if someone, conversations can often happen ad lib, but not with this show. This show is quite different to previous work that I've made. It's so much more deliberately divided from the audience until the end, when we have at the beginning and the end is when we're kind of much more together. And then the middle of it is kind of about the audience watching something happen on stage, which is kind of trying to present something super internal, but obviously in a very public space.
And could you talk a bit about the process of how the show's developed from the initial idea to what people are going to experience at the Fringe?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a beast. It's been a wild ride, mostly because we've also had a global pandemic through the middle of making it.
Right.
So
Okay.
figure out how we work as a team, how we do that online when we're coming together, and like different variations of how we're all figuring out the next bit of the process and the next evolution of the show. But also it's a super personal bit of work. So, making work that's rooted or comes from an autobiographical standpoint is not new to me. I kind of always steal interesting autobiographical bits, but then churn it up so it's not, I'm not making it for my sake. But with this piece, it's the most personal story that I could share, and also there's trauma in that. So there's something, an interesting thing. I don't make art for it to be cathartic for me, but as an artist, you're always questioning who you are, what the world is, how you communicate with other people, what are these big messy ideas, and how do you digest them and figure them out a bit. So it has been a real process of me figuring out how I talk about the story, what is important for an audience to actually know, and what do we have to hold back? Because I think with trauma, we never want to trauma dump, the team and I never want to trauma dump on an audience, and we don't want to kind of dramatize something that actually doesn't need dramatizing or isn't interesting dramaturgically to do that. So it's been a whole journey. My wonderful director has been incredibly patient because there are times where I was like, I think there's like 30 characters. And she was like, are you sure? I was like, no, maybe there's only 10. And then there's no characters. It's just the true story. So it's really gone on a whirlwind. But I think the way that we got to where we are now is because we had the team, and we worked in a super like democratic space, in the sense of, you know, Melanie is the sound
Yeah.
amazing being, but Melanie's also a writer and a director and a dramaturg. So they kind of brought all of themselves to it and then created this architecture of sound, which allowed us to then be like, oh, right, this is how we think about the text. And then once we had the text, it was like, oh, yeah. And then you know what? We need this feeling with the lights. So it was very much always in communication with each like elemental form, instead of being like, here's the script, now we're going to rehearse and then we'll put the lights and sound on top. It's been the opposite of that.
So everything, because you're spoken about the importance of the collaboration on this project, and everything kind of fed into everything else almost.
Yeah, definitely. Like that's been vital. Also because, you know, it's a story of sexual violence, or my story of that, and sitting with that and being with that. But sadly, to many different varying degrees, lots of people have an experience of that. So it felt important for us that it was made by a collection of artists who understood why we were sharing the story and why we weren't just quietly packing it away, whilst also not speaking for anyone else.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's been so important about the collaboration, that it's politically as important as conceptually and formally, that we're all working together on it. It's not just me being like, this is what I want to say, because also I was like, I don't know what I want to say, help me. You know, I needed that community and collaboration to figure it out.
And as the performances go on, does it continue to change? Does it continue to adapt?
Well, I mean, fundamentally, no.
Mhm.
But when anything comes up, then things will shift. As in, it's nice as an artist to always know that you have the choice to be responsive. So with the piece, we don't hide away from the darkness within it. Hopefully, we make people feel safe and feel held enough to be with that, or to know that they can leave and come back. But, you know, we have had feedback sometimes. And I think what's exciting about that is we can take that and evolve it for future audiences. So the show's 45 minutes, but we have a 60-minute slot at Zoo Southside. And what we will do with that is the last 15 minutes, you know, the performance will have ended, but the heart of what the show is won't have. So that 15 minutes are for the audience to sit, be in the space, go and lie on the stage if they want to. You know, we may have somewhere where they can write down some thoughts and just put them in a box, in the understanding that like it's big stuff that we're talking about, and that might evoke something in an audience. So we want to give them a bit of space and time to do whatever they need to do before they then leave the theatre space and go back into the busyness of Edinburgh. So I think, you know, that's not fundamentally shifting what I do as a performer, but actually it is shifting what the art is, and how, as a collection of artists, we are responsive to the show being real and in the real world, and people having real responses to it. So
Because it sounds, I mean, I find particularly with theatre that something
yeah.
that's very personal, as this is, often creates the greatest empathy. And there will be people that, as you say, there will be, that sounds a really lovely thing to do, because it sounds like the kind of show, if you were just kicked out because the next one was coming straight on, it would be kind of a shock in itself.
Exactly. And you're kind of like, great, thanks for witnessing that, goodbye.
Yeah.
And also, like, in a way, that's what it is to be a human, to witness other people. And I think for an audience, sometimes it's a hard job being an audience, because you're doing lots of absorbing, and then you're just like, okay, now I'm gonna have to just go and feed myself, or have a coffee, or communicate with other human beings. And it's nice to just, you know, for some people writing does nothing, but actually, if you want to get something out, maybe it's useful to write something and post it in a box and know that will I haven't figured out how if we say we'll read it, or if I say I'll ceremoniously burn it for everyone, whatever. I haven't figured out. Maybe we have two. People can choose if they want their written things to be read or burnt. But just to be in a space, or have a conversation with someone that they might have come with, to just stay in that moment a bit, like you said, instead of being like, goodbye.
Yeah, a bit of kind of contemplation time. I think it's a really nice idea, especially.
Yeah.
What drove you to address what you do in the play? What was the kind of theme behind it, the idea behind it?
Yeah, sure. And I'll go into detail, but for anyone listening or watching, this is just a little content warning that the show is rooted in sexual violence. So I'm not going to go into super loads of detail, but for anyone who might need to pause or take a moment, this is your little warning. I mean, in a totally bonkers way, the show was going to be about Vikings and shield maidens.
Right.
I'm really glad we're not making that show. I'm really glad we're not making that show. But it was looking at kind of women figures or warriors and mythology and geography and context. That went out the window because something happened to me that I was like, you know what, this is super important. And actually, I want to talk about it. So I was on a run and I got attacked by a total stranger who was trying to get me into a building, who was trying to rape me, which is not a nice thing to say, but that's the truth of the story. I got away, and that's kind of as much I'll say about that experience.
Sure.
But what the reason why I thought I want to make something about this is it was regardless of the personal
Yeah.
figuring out and healing and struggles around that, it was hard to talk about.
Mhm.
But also, ironically, the thing that allowed me to get away was I used my voice. I made huge, big sounds, and one person heard, and that was this moment that allowed me to get away and the story to go in a different way. It's hard talking about this because lots of people, my story is not symbolic of anyone else's story. So it
Sure.
feels really important to say that. And it's not me saying what anyone should be doing in that situation because no one can say that. And everyone has a response that will be right for them or wrong for them, but it's theirs. But for me, it was fascinating that in the moment where I was most vulnerable, all of a sudden, this huge power that I didn't know I had
Mhm.
suddenly came out, and it's hard to get back to that. And I'd like not ever to get back to it, but I was like, wow,
Yeah.
there was this beast inside me actually that I was either scared of previously or had never quite met, or but that whole experience, aside a huge array of awfulness,
Mhm.
made me start to think, okay, actually, I apologize way more than I need to all the time. And I'm often will make myself smaller than I want to be, or I'll take up less space. So that's why I wanted to make the show, to be like, this thing happened. I got to meet a version of myself that I've not ever met before. And it's not like I'm suddenly like, and now I'm totally badass
Mhm.
and I never wobble and I'm never small and never like that's not true at all. But it felt so important to be like, actually, I want to talk about this
Yeah.
because you know what? Finding your power is hard. Connecting to that again and again is really difficult. And even when you do, it's messy. And there
Yeah.
might be moments where you're like, yeah, I'm in my power. And then all of a sudden it goes away and you're like, oh, I don't
Yeah.
know what to do in this moment now. So even though it's a story rooted in my experience of sexual violence, it's much bigger than that because that's the kind of root cause into thinking about power, really, and your own voice and what that means to each of us. But simultaneously, you can't use your voice if no one's listening to
Yeah.
your voice. Like they have to exist together. So it's really a piece for us to think about what is your relationship with your voice, but also what is your relationship to really listening to
Mhm.
yourself, but also to other people, because that's a really vital bit. You know, there's no point us all figuring out how we get empowered if by empowering ourselves, we ignore everyone else.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I
Which
think
I,
that's the reason it sounds to me like such a special piece of theatre, is because it clearly you know, you're speaking to yourself, the heard voice is your own voice, but now you're speaking to the audiences who are hearing you as well. And that's such a kind of important thing, I think, for theatre to do.
Yeah, so important to, like you said, when something's so personal, when it becomes so specific, it has a way of being more universal or letting people empathize with it. And some clever artist quoted that, and I've forgotten who they are, so I can't quote
Think
them.
about yourself.
What a fraud. But I think that's it. It's like taking something super personal, and actually it took us a year to realize we just need to tell the story.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we could tell it abstractly like this, or we could tell it as a fable, and we were like, no, let's just stop. Let's just tell the story. But it's really interesting about how, you know, you make it live because I'm performing live and the
Yeah.
audience are listening live and feeling responses live. But there's a real clear bit in the show where I turn directly and I talk about this face, which is the person that in my real life experience listened and came out to look for this sound that was coming from me. But that's happening then in a theatre space. And we've spent 25 minutes of me doing this super, super physical movement section with the lights and the sound. And then I suddenly turn and look directly to the audience. And I'm not talking about the audience, but I also kind of am, because they're listening to this whole or seeing this whole thing. So it's really fascinating to be playing at those two levels at one time, because I think also with all our experiences, a memory that we have of something is existing in the moment anyway. So it's, yeah, anyway, I won't try and sound too philosophical. I'll leave it there.
But it sounds to me like in the development, that's maybe where collaboration really becomes important, because you are asking the questions of other people, even though it's your story initially.
Yeah, definitely. And that feels like super important. It's asking other questions of other people, like, how does this land for you? Or what does your mean to you? What does power mean to you? Well, at the same time, I'm never speaking for anyone else,
Yeah.
which is a real important distinction to make for me. It's not me standing on stage being like, I'm speaking for everyone who's experienced sexual violence. Absolutely not. I'm speaking for myself, and I've had a team to help me figure that out. But also I'm joining in all of the other amazing people who have already started movements and conversations around how we don't silence stories of sexual violence, or how we don't, you know, silence women, but also acknowledging that it's not just women that experience sexual violence. It's, you know, how we sit with our vulnerability and pain and healing. And we do that in community, really. Like, I couldn't be here talking to you about this if it wasn't for all of the people around me, artistically and personally, that have been like, I've got you.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a really communal experience. That's a great way of putting it. Are you looking forward to Edinburgh?
You know what I am? I'm like, I've got ants in my pants with nervousness, but I'm buzzing. I'm so excited. And I've been up to Edinburgh before in other shows with,
Right.
you know, people that I've been part of the team with. And again, I'm coming up as part of a team.
Yeah.
But what's so exciting is to come up with a show that has come from my brain and my heart and been made, and it feels like mine. Well, it feels like ours. It feels like the You Heard Me team's show.
Sure.
And I'm just so excited to also, we're coming up as part of the Here and Now showcase, which is like performance in England being taken up for kind of international markets, but also just audiences in Edinburgh. But it feels nice again to be part of a bigger community of people. There's like 7 artists. Yeah, it's really exciting. Really exciting. Yeah, I can't wait.
And before we say goodbye, you should really remind people where and when they can catch You Heard Me.
Yes, thank you. We're at Zoo Southside, 4:30 from the 20th to the 25th of August, 4:30 p.m. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to rock up to 4:30 a.m.
Well,
show.
it is Edinburgh during the Fringe, you never know. But
Might be pushing it, yeah. Yeah. But
well, look, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, and all the very best in Edinburgh. It sounds like a great
so
show.
much, Alistair. It's been so lovely to chat to you, and I'm really looking forward to being there and maybe seeing you IRL.
That would be great. And I'm now joined by Guy Woods to hear about Puddles and Amazons, which will be at the demonstration room at Summer Hall at 4:40 p.m. throughout the Fringe. I notice, except the 12th and 19th, where we have a good couple of days off, well deserved, I'm sure. Hello, Guy.
Hiya, how you doing?
I'm really well, and I'm really intrigued to hear all about Puddles and Amazons. So what can you tell us?
Sure. It's a storytelling show, written and performed by me, about a boy who eats an ice lolly when he finds out his mum's died, and he freezes internally. He basically gets the worst brain freeze of his life, and it's the story of his cold teenagehood and growing up and everything that's awful about being a teenager, as well as turning swimming pools cold and having lots of hot showers and hugging radiators. And yeah, it's a little bit fun, a little bit silly, hopefully a bit sweet, and definitely a bit odd, I'd say. Yeah.
It actually, to me, sounds really moving. It's such a lovely idea. Almost like a kind of fairy story idea.
Sure. Yeah, I think so. I mean, that was a big part of it, was wanting to sort of elevate the everyday into the quite mythic. So a lot of the settings, like, PE lessons or school sports halls or just the house or beach, it's supposed to be elevating this idea of the everyday into something that's yeah, larger than life. And so it's quite a simple enough story, but told in quite a heightened, fairyish way, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, almost like some of the older German fairy tales. I was thinking,
Yeah.
I've got kind of dark sides to them.
Yeah, they're quite haunting, aren't they?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I totally agree. And that idea, I could almost, when I was, thinking about the show, I could almost see this as kind of animation,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that's a lovely, kind of strong image. But what can people expect when they come along as members of
Cool.
the audience?
Well, I think it's sort of, I mean, it's a good point that you pick up on. It's sort of like illustration. I don't think the story could properly be dramatized in a way. Like, I think if it was to exist in another form, the story would probably be, yeah, an animation, because it's a bit too surreal. So the what the audience can expect is something that hopefully draws on lots of different aspects of theatricality, that makes the text something that we weave together, because I'm telling the story and providing a lot of description and dialogue, but also looping sounds, using audience interaction with that. Just a bit of sort of chat, nothing big, no pressure, and no one sort of singled out, so it's fine. I think for something that is hoping to tell a sweet story and hoping to connect with its audience members, and doesn't apologize about trying to do that, but at the same time doesn't take itself too seriously. I think it's very easy to do shows which either apologize or take themselves too seriously, and those are two sort of uh, two things I try not to do, even though I do apologize a lot. But yeah.
And this has already been produced. It's already been on stage, hasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So, well, we did a 20-minute version of it at the Tron. I think, well, 15 as the record goes, but it was 20, I think, in practice. But yeah, so we did that at the Tron Theatre, part of their Outside Eyes showcase last year, and that was amazing. It was a really fun experience, and all my friends came, and I'm topless at the start, which obviously was very funny for them, and they were very supportive about my body. Yeah, it was a really great experience, and because I'd largely moved into writing since university, because it was sort of the area that I preferred, and it's the area that I felt I was strongest in. Um, I'd kind of moved away from performing as much. It was my first time performing in about 4 years last year, and I'd forgotten how much I loved it, and it was just exciting. It's that liveness and the danger, and that's what I'm sort of hoping to bring with this show, is that danger as well, because there's stuff that could really go wrong, and I think that's the point. That's otherwise, I don't know, do a crossword, and I love a crossword, but it's in different mediums.
And how did audiences react when you've? I'm very interested to see
Yeah.
how audience work, because you're obviously every time you're there, it's a different audience, and you'll get.
Sure.
Will that, because if you said it's interactive, if only mildly interactive, but that will kind of change the show, I guess, every night.
Yeah, yeah, it won't get boring. I think that's for sure. Yeah, every show is going to be different because it has to be different. But I think that's what's exciting. It's that idea of like it's a relationship between you as a performer and audience, or a performance writer. That relationship between the performer, the text, and the audience is something that theatre inherently needs to, I think, address in some way, even if indirectly, because otherwise it's a soap opera and it lacks what makes theatre so exciting,
Yeah.
is that liveness on the day. And that doesn't mean it can't be incredibly scripted. I mean, Alice Birch's Anatomy of a Suicide is the perfect example of something that is so scripted down to when they say the lines, in time. Do you know how they performed it? How they learned the lines?
Yeah.
So because of the three different narratives going on at the same time, Emma Rice, when she was directing it, made the actors learn their lines in time to this set score that was then an hour and a half, hour and 40 long, and so they said things in time with the score. So they were saying the same lines at the same time every night, but where the variation came was from the space in between the lines and everything around it. So um, yeah, so I'd say with this, there's liveness. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's exactly what theatre does that other art forms just can't do, is have that, there's no point having an audience and no one on stage, and the same vice versa. It's in that connection where the kind of, sometimes tension or magic kind of happens, I think. And how did the show come to be? How has it developed from an initial idea to what it is now?
Sure. I mean, I think it started with me reading a Yoko Ogawa short story where which was all about sort of outlines and imprints and puddles, and there was just this visual of this father and son who are like Christian missionaries who talk to this woman on her doorstep for 20 minutes, but they're in their rain jackets and they're dripping, and when they leave, the woman just sort of stares at the puddles from where they've been dripping, and that image really stayed with me, and so I think it sort of grew from there. And in terms of developing it to where it is now, quite early on, once I had the script and I'd applied to Outside Eyes with it, I then got my director Rachel on board, and then since then, after Outside Eyes, we sort of took the feedback that we got and kicked on, and I wrote an extra 30 minutes or so, maybe 35, and that is a lot more experimental, playing a lot more with the sort of different forms of it, and working a lot with the loop pedal, and seeing how we can make some exciting live foley and sound mixing, and use the water and make things dangerous, and not in an electrical sense of danger, but in
I was thinking that a loop pedal in water
loop
was
pedal, yeah. No, our producer Belenji, I don't think is very happy about all these risk assessments, which is fair enough. Yeah, don't blame them.
But I was really interested in the sound that you've developed for the show, because it, as you suggested there, it's live.
Yeah, yeah. So the sound is again playing into this idea. Your first point, you mentioned of sort of this idea of the fairies and the idea of the fairy tale element, and that same idea of turning the everyday into something bigger than itself is hopefully carried through with the way we create sounds as well, because a lot of it, you know, if you half bite into an apple, it sounds like footsteps in snow, and looping gulps into sort of a dance music track at one point. That was something I was working on last week. And yeah, trying to make these sounds into something not misrepresentative, but larger than what they really are. I think that's where it comes in, um, and then we use the audience as well. It brings them in, with sort of creating a laugh track and that kind of thing.
Oh, excellent. That sounds fascinating, because often many shows, even if the show changes on a nightly basis, the sound is
Yeah,
pretty much set.
yeah, yeah,
Almost a kind of characterful
yeah,
itself, which is interesting.
yeah.
And you mentioned the director and producer. Collaboration is always a kind of important part
Yeah.
of things. Can you talk a bit about the process this time round?
Yeah. So, I mean, Rachel and Belenji, who are respectively my director and producer, are both fantastic creatives, and they both have a background in script work. Belenji worked for Short Circuit, uh, the short film fund, as a script editor, and Rachel worked as a storyliner for River City. So it's the redrafting has been really fun with the two of them, because they give great notes, and that's kind of all you want, is you want someone who can sort of um, is you want people to challenge you and in different directions, and they both do in their different ways. And yeah, so I've been really enjoying that, and I think also getting a bit sillier with it. I think when I did it at the Tron, it was quite linchpins, sort
Right.
of the beginning and the end of the piece. Whereas now, when you've got more grey, you can get in a bit more strangeness, and yeah. And so I think working with Belenji and Rachel is really good, because I think we complement each other quite well. Because I think I maybe will push things because I think they're funny, or because I think they're weird and I think that's exciting. But I do have a tendency to waffle. I do have a tendency to not stick to the most crucial beats. And Rachel's very good at filtering that out, as is Belenji, very sort of story oriented. So I think it's good because we all bring different approaches to it, which is really nice. Yeah.
It almost sounds like the relationship a writer might have with an editor.
Sure. Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
the things that the yourself might think, oh, these really work, then
Yeah.
it's, oh, well, let's just have a conversation about that at least.
Exactly. Yeah. And that sort of the ability for both of you to be wrong and both of you to be right. Of yeah. And I think I think it evolved out of the fact that I studied at I did my masters with Rachel, my director. So that's how I met her. And so we've always given each other notes throughout sort of our masters, and then onwards. And so I've always really valued her notes, because yeah, it's that sort of editor relationship, and because she thinks differently to me. I think definitely I think we've got like actually quite different tastes in certain things, but I think I really admire the work she makes, and I think she likes the work I make. So it's like yeah, so it is quite similar to that editor writer relationship.
And how do you end up working together? Is it, you know, do you think that here's, I've written this, or I've, you know,
Yeah,
I've got this idea in mind, here's the person I want to work with, or
yeah.
how does it work?
So with Rachel, it was a bit different, because it was for Outside Eyes at the Tron, which we didn't have funding for. They gave us a little bit of money, but very little, I'd say. So it was sort of who of my friends do I know who would be up for putting the hours into this for free? Um, was one of the questions, and I did think I immediately thought of Rachel. I thought she would be too busy for it. But yeah, I asked her because she hadn't done much directing before. But like I say, I really admire her work, and that's how it came about, sort of assembling the creative team. And we were very lucky. I think we did well at the Tron because I wanted to do a lot of rehearsals, and Rachel was up for that. And I don't think it would have been so, such a great evening if it hadn't been, at least for me, as in if it hadn't been for the fact that we'd really put in the hours in the sort of month leading up to it. And yeah, so that's how that. And then with Belenji, I know her through film work because I do some sort of film work as well. And I knew that she'd been doing some work for Screen Fringe last year, and
Right.
so I asked if she wanted to get involved because I thought she'd get along with Rachel. Um, I think also, as much as anything, you kind of want people who are going to get along with each other. So you sort of
Yeah.
you're throwing a party, and that's as important a thing as any. So yeah, that was how it kind of came about.
So the Tron show's 20 minutes, kind of 15, 20,
Yeah,
and it's a full hour?
yeah,
And
full
is it-
hour, maybe 55 minutes to an hour. It sort of depends on the audience each day.
I guess it. So,
Yeah,
I mean, how was that to develop it to become the longer piece that it's going to be?
yeah, exciting. It's just adding in all the detail and all the exploration. It's that sort of prosaic thing of short form is short form should always be poetry in that it should be condensed text. So in a short film or a short excerpt of a play, which might be the opening scene or whatever, you want that to extrapolate out into sinews of the whole grand story or universe and everywhere it could go. It can't just be contained to that frame because otherwise you're missing an opportunity and it's quite sort of surface level. Um, and then when you get into something which is longer form like this, like a full hour of just telling quite a simple story, you get to do all the detailing, and that is something I've loved. Like that's the isn't there the Sylvia Plath thing of like you can only put toothbrushing in a novel, you can't put it in a poem. And yeah, it's yeah, so I've really enjoyed getting into more of the detail and yeah, and digging in because a lot of then the scenes have come out of thinking, okay, what's going to happen? What happens in a teenager's life, and then what would happen if this teenager lived at 4 degrees Celsius? How would that affect him? Um, and sort of inventing this strange like backstory, and then it means that then there's also all this like character work that you're not aware you've done, or you know, there was a version of the script where there were a teacher called Madame Gaunt, which means um, Lady Gloves, and you sort of go into I don't know all the nebules of different parts of his life, and when those get edited out, they don't sort of disappear. They're still there, informing you and your understanding of the world and the story, which is nice.
So is it almost like you're adding chapters as you go
Yeah,
along? Kind of-
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think what made that easier is because I had started very much with the beginning and the end, and everything's about the sort of shape of things and this outline. And so there's liberty to sort of jump between things
Yeah.
um, in a sort of not nearly so artfully or cleverly, but the way that in Slaughterhouse-5, the
Mhm.
Kurt Vonnegut book, that there's that sort of hopping back and forth um, when he gets unstuck in time. I
Yeah.
think there's that sort of feeling to it, hopefully, in the flitting between the moments.
Oh, fantastic. And are you looking forward to the Fringe? Is it kind of expectation, anxiety? What's the feeling about it now that it's coming soon?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited. I think, yeah, there's a bit of nerves. I think as much as anything, I'm sort of keeping an eye on the finances. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, it's a festival. It's like it is the most exciting place in the world. Maybe that's not true. It's one of the it's one of the most exciting sort of arts festivals in the world, and I've seen some incredible stuff and stuff that's really inspired me there over the years, and so I'm very excited for it. And to be living in Edinburgh for the month will be nice. But yeah, I think I'm slightly wary because the last time I did a full run, I was 20, so I was bulletproof and
Yeah.
just you were just just going crazy every night, and I I don't think I can do that now. So yeah, there's a bit more caution.
I think there's no bad thing to be aware of that.
Yeah,
Rather than going, yeah, I'm 20 again. Let's
yeah, exactly.
relive my past.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Guy, I think it'd be a good time to remind people of where they
Mm.
can see Puddles and Amazons and when.
Sure, it's at Summer Hall in the demonstration room at 4:40 p.m. The demonstration room actually is where they used to show um, the autopsies of dead bodies. It's a fun fact for you. So yeah, you can come and decide if that fits or not.
Yeah, I have to say, if you've never been to Summer Hall, it's a great space, and what a great excuse to go
Yeah,
along, visit and see puddles
yeah.
and Amazons at the same time. Guy, thank you so much for taking the time
Thank
to
you
talk
so
to me,
much.
and all the best with the Fringe.
Thank you, Alistair. It's been lovely chatting to you.
I'm now joined by Barton Williams and Andrew Eaton Lewis to hear all about Precious Cargo, which will be at the demonstration room in Summer Hall during the Fringe at 3:10 in the afternoon. Hello, both.
Hello.
So I'm going to ask you to explain your roles in this piece of theatre, Barton, yourself, because you're kind of central to what's going on here.
Yeah, so I'm Barton Williams. I'm an actor and a co-writer in this production, Precious Cargo. So it's very strong to my heart, and it's a personal story, but it's also a wonderful journey of history, humanitarian messages, and I think the audience will love it.
And Andrew, last time we've had you on a couple of times, usually talking about your music in the past. What's your role in the production of Precious Cargo?
Yeah, well, I'm wearing a different hat today. I've been producing theatre shows from the Isle of Lewis for a few years now, and so I met Barton back in 2021, and discovered that he was writing this play about the experiences of growing up as a Vietnam War adoptee. And yes, and as it happened, that there is one of my friends on the Isle of Lewis is Andy Yearley, a musician, is also a Vietnam War adoptee. So we introduced the two of them over dinner, and I mean Barton can tell you a bit more about that, but that was sort of the genesis of this project.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, I've been reading a lot about it before we decided to chat, and the whole story just sounds incredible. Barton, tell us about it. Tell us about the story and how that became Precious Cargo.
Yeah, so it stems from, I guess, a way of me dealing with some of the adversity and challenges in my life. And what happened is throughout life, obviously I was adopted from Vietnam, and throughout life I was constantly asked questions by people. And one of them was, "But what are you?" And that led me to writing a children's book many years ago. And it was all about curiosity of people asking, "Hang on, you sound Australian, but you look Vietnamese." So I was constantly getting asked that as a child, and then in my latter years as well, as a young adult, I was getting asked, "But what are you, Barton?" Or, "But where are you really from?"
Yeah.
And over time, that curiosity got the better of me, and that's why I ended up writing the children's book. And then someone said to me, "All right, that's great. You've written this to educate children on breaking stereotypes and identification and belonging." And someone said to me, "Why aren't you writing for an adult audience?" And I said, "Well, I can't do that." And they said, "Well, no, you can. You just need to put pen to paper." And then so I started writing it. And with time, I kept on speaking to people about it, and explored where I could go with it. And then eventually in 2021, the same year that I met Andrew and Laura on the Isle of Lewis, I actually got the original script into the Vaults London Festival as a staged reading. And that gave me the confidence to go, "Hey, these people are right back in Australia. This can be warranted with an adult audience, adults who actually find this engaging." So that gave me the confidence to go, "All right, I need to keep working with it." And then obviously when I met Andrew and Laura, and then met Andy, the rest was history, because then we had a creative team. We had Andy, who could totally understand the feelings and displacement that I experienced as a youngster and even as an adult. But we had a creative team in Scotland, and that's where the true Precious Cargo, the production that people were going to see, that's when it was really, I guess it was almost, if I use the analogy, it was sort of like it was in its early fetal stage,
Yeah.
or an embryo, and it's developed into a living being now.
And Andrew, when did you come on board with this then? When did you decide, yeah, this is something that we can make a piece of theatre between us all?
Well, it's funny. I mean, it took a little while. I mean, when we introduced Barton to Andy on the Isle of Lewis in 2021, I mean, Barton was there filming a feature film called Silent Roar, which later went on to the Edinburgh Film Festival. And because we knew Barton had told us a bit about this script, and we thought, well, Andy is someone he should meet. I mean, it was really just so they could meet each other, because it seemed like they could have a lot of fun, both growing up on completely opposite sides of the world, but both growing up in quite sort of small communities. Both we'd later discovered had made these return trips to Vietnam. But for a while, it was simply just a fascinating conversation about that. But then we just started talking about it a bit more. We thought it'd be interesting to expand the story a bit. I mean, Barton, I think after reflecting on this trip and meeting Andy, you decided, hadn't you, that you really wanted Andy to be part of this story and to make it kind of bigger. So it was about the sort of broader experiences of Vietnam War adoptees from different parts of the world.
Totally. Yeah. I can just add there, totally, Andrew. So what happened was, meeting Andy gave me the confidence to go that, this story is worth sharing, but also here's someone that actually understood me in terms of what I'd been through. Not that it was tragic, but there were some challenges growing up. And then Andrew managed to source other orphans from around the world, and they were sharing the same sort of messages and stories. So we all of us then realized, hang on, this is definitely, we're onto something here to share this story, because it's not just my story. Whereas at first it was, and I was thinking, oh, this is really quite narcissistic. It's a play about Barton and it's me. It's not that. It's actually more than that. And I think that's what's really beautiful about it, is that Andrew managed to get these orphans through social media, or Andrew can tell you, but and we've got other orphans that are sharing similar experiences, and then sometimes not sharing the same experiences. So it really opened a can of worms in terms of Vietnamese orphans.
So it's going from being kind of your individual story, and then Andy, and then Andrew. It's moved on from there again.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some really fascinating conversations over the past year and a half with different adoptees from across the world. And we spoke to someone who grew up in a small town in the south of England. We spoke to someone who grew up in New York, somebody who grew up in Iowa, and they've all had, I mean, what comes out of this is they've all had very, very different experiences depending on where they grew up and what sort of circumstances they had. I mean, some adoptees have had, I mean, quite privileged lives in some ways. Some of them have had very, very challenging lives, and where they just didn't get on with their adopted families at all. Some are incredibly close to their adopted families. Some have been spending years and years through DNA searches and the internet, really trying hard to find their Vietnamese birth families. And have that kind of yearning to find them, and still after all this time. Some have managed to find their Vietnamese families, and actually found that has actually complicated their lives in ways they hadn't. So it's a very sort of diverse set of experiences. Yeah.
Barton, it sounds as though it's quite an emotional piece. What can audiences expect when they go along?
It is emotional, only in the sense that it's so personal. I think audiences will be really surprised, because it does look at the trials and tribulations. I mean, it's emotional, but it's also, there's a lot of beautiful things that happen. And like Andrew was saying, everyone's story is so unique. But what is underlying amongst all of the orphans is at some stage in their life, whether it was young or when they're older, they're just intrigued by the curiosity of it all. You know, irrespective of whether they were brought up and raised in America, Australia, or Scotland, at some stage in their life, they've decided, hang on, I wonder who is mum? Hang on, who is dad? Hang on, maybe I should do a DNA test. So that's what's really interesting. And sometimes they're happy to do that. Sometimes they're a little bit angry, or there's a variety of emotions. And I'd like to think that the audience are taken on a bit of a roller coaster ride. There's lots of twists and turns, and that can make us laugh, but also, it can be very emotional.
And in terms of staging, is it just yourself on stage?
It is, but what's beautiful about this is that the design, thanks to the creative team, you know, Laura and Robbie Thompson, and then Andy's music. We've got a creative team that have managed to pull this emotional story with, yes, one person on stage, but without giving it all away. There's a lot of things happening on stage with projections and images and lighting, let alone the music from Andy. So I would say it's a hybrid. I'm sure Andrew would agree there. It's a hybrid of multimedia and with me on stage as well, which helps tell these great stories.
I think people, as Barton say, will be surprised by this show. I don't think what anyone will expect, partly in terms of the stories, but very much in terms of the visuals. I mean, Laura, who has directed this, I mean, she's been directing shows for many years, but her roots are sort of in live art and in dance and in sort of installation art, and so she's come up with these incredibly beautiful visuals where there are things going on all the time. Projections and video footage and a lot of photographs of well, I don't want to give too much away, but photographs of the kind of community, get across the kind of the lives of some of the people that we've spoken to for the show. Yeah, so it's a very visually beautiful show. There's a lot going on around Barton. I mean, I think if you're going to take a show to the Fringe, you've really got to go for it in terms of every aspect of it. So we've got really strong, really emotionally engaging story, these beautiful visuals, and of course this absolutely gorgeous music from Andy Early. We really want to give a shout out to him because he's one of the best musicians in the Outer Hebrides. He's very much in demand. He's written this beautiful piano score, which Laura has also sort of expanded and manipulated into loops and sort of ambient sounds. So it's become this huge sort of almost sort of symphonic thing between Andy's music and what Laura's managed to do with it. So yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the music because I read it's all original composition. So that in itself, you're getting something else which perhaps you might not expect.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, again, this is perhaps an unexpected thing without giving too much away. I mean, Andy he's a great Hebridean musician. He's very sort of rooted in sort of Scottish traditional music. And a lot of what he plays is that he plays at Cayleys and that kind of thing. But his score is not exactly that. It's not quite what you'd expect. It's perhaps it draws on Vietnamese music a little bit. It draws on jazz and all these different interesting influences. So, yeah.
And we've been talking to other artists and performers about the nature of collaboration, and you've kind of touched upon it already. Barton, was it a case of you had to find this team of collaborators to really bring this story to fruition?
Yeah, it was sort of a bit of fate as well. Like Andrew was saying, I was there filming Silent Raw, and I think what's beautiful about this is it's all happened for the right reason. I was, in a beautiful part of the world in the Outer Hebrides, never been there before. I was doing something that I love, acting and surfing, and then I meet an orphan from the opposite side of the world who's shared the exact same experiences as me, except he's Scottish.
Yeah.
He's me. He's exactly me, but not me. But he is me because he is Scottish. He is Vietnamese by ethnicity. His home roots are Scottish. My home roots are Australian. And we're in Scotland sharing this experience, and it just all culminated. It was exactly what I needed as far as reinforcing the story that, okay, I'm not the only one that's going through this, and that people will be able to relate to it. And I mean, obviously Andy did relate to it. And yeah, just it was meant to be. The creative process, it's happened innately, thanks to the Hebrides, and that I think that shines through the production as well. It's uniquely, how do I say it? Outer Hebridean? Is that the correct word, Andrew?
Yes, it's a funny thing. What was originally this very Australian show has become a very sort of Hebridean show in many ways. It's very much about Barton's experience here, and there are particular images which, and I'm conscious I've already given away a few spoilers perhaps, but there are particular images that are so sort of Hebridean, and particular scenes that are very sort of in kind of key Hebridean locations.
And I was going to ask about, it seems to me a piece of theatre where the sense of place is utterly central, but from what you have just said, that is the case. And I'm taking, not, you've got Australia, you've got Hebrides, but then you've got these other stories and their sense of place, and then always coming back to Vietnam, I'm guessing.
Correct. Yes.
Yes, and there was and again, yes, Vietnam does figure very strongly in it. And I mean, there's in terms of the kind of internationalism of it. I mean, one of my favorite bits of the show is where Barton talks about the Hebrides reminding him of Kangaroo Island in Australia, and I had to kind of look up photos of this place, and it's very much like the Isle of Lewis. So it's about connecting with place in lots of different ways.
And Andrew, you could never have known when you introduced the two men that this was going to come from it. You might just have hoped for a pleasant evening. When did you started to get other people involved? I mean, that's something, as someone that's made theatre and made other art in the past, you must really enjoy, is the collaborative process.
It's been a lovely experience. I mean, in some ways, this sort of fell in our lap, we Barton met Andy. He got on really well with Andy. He'd already become quite friendly with us because Laura at the time was working as part of the crew on Silent Raw, so that's sort of how she got to know Andy. I think you maybe met Laura first, actually, didn't you? Because you were working on the film together.
Yep. Yes.
And then we had a fun night with Barton in the place where he was staying with some of the other cast, and then that's when Andy's name came into it, and then we had dinner together. And so Barton was then up twice, and we met Andy again. But yeah, so for quite a few months, it was just chat, it was just chat and exchanging life experiences and finding we had lots of interesting things in common. And I think sometimes that's the best way to start a creative project together, just get to know each other first, and not rather than kind of forcing something. I mean, it was only really a few months later after Barton had left and we were sort of talking by Zoom and by email that we thought, yeah, mate, there's something here, and we should explore this a bit further. So it felt very organic.
Yeah, it sounds that. It sounds as though that's a really nice side of it, is that it's happened not by accident, but just unfolded through friendships and connections and all of those things, which I think still is probably fairly rare. It sounds like a wonderful show. I'm looking forward to seeing it myself. We should remind people before we go where they can see it and when.
Yes, it's at Summer Hall, and we're delighted to be part of the Summer Hall program. It's one of the best venues for new theatre at the Fringe. So to get a place there is thrilling. So and we're in the demonstration room at 3:10 every afternoon from previewing on 1st of August, and then kind of right through the month.
Yeah, you're glutton for punishment. You're doing the full month, which I admire. People don't do that much anymore.
Well, yeah, it's all on Barton really, but yeah, I mean, we figured if you're going to do the Fringe, do the Fringe.
I totally agree, absolutely. Barton and Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, and all the very best for the Fringe.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And I'm joined now by Ian McKechnie and Jose Rojas to hear all about The Other, which is on at the Scottish Storytelling Centre between the 14th and 16th of August at 3:15 p.m. and again at 6:45 p.m. Is that correct, Ian?
Yes, the Wednesday and the Thursday are both 3:15, and the Friday it's early evening 6:45.
Okay, and that's as part of the Made in Scotland showcase. First of all, hello to both of you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I think it'd be interesting to hear about the roles that you have in this, what seems like a very collaborative piece. So, Jose, perhaps you could tell us what your involvement is with The Other.
Hello. Yes, first of all, thank you very much for having us. Yes. Well, I am one of the percussion players, one of the percussionists in The Other, and yeah, basically, I don't know, a couple of years ago, maybe a bit more. I saw Ian on the on the neighborhood. We live quite close, and he invited me. That's on the shop where he used to buy the groceries, and and we know each other from other this song workshop and all or other projects, and he just told me, look, you want to be part of this, and I say for sure, you know, and then I realized what is this about, you know, about the others, and was about the collaborative stuff, and mainly the amazing musicians that are part of the project, that they are, you know, for me are well, you know, the top ones, you know, and I really have learned a lot of them. So yeah.
That's really interesting. You're the second people I've spoken to where you met kind of almost not by accident, but you met in another rage, instead of saying we're going to put people together to work, and then something's come out of that meeting. Ian, what's your role in this, and how did you kind of, you know, how did that meeting lead to the other?
Well, I had been, as Jose said, I'd been coordinating workshops, mostly percussion workshops at youth groups and community centres. And Jose was involved in presenting workshops with young teenagers. And I got to the point where I thought, I'm meeting with all these different musicians, it'd be great to start collaborating. And as it evolved, I then met an Iranian percussionist, Ali Rahmani, who also did a workshop with Jose, and he introduced me to a further 3 Iranian musicians. And slowly it started to build from that. We worked on basic ideas, and then I got funding from Creative Scotland's creative development scheme, and I was able to recruit Esther Swift on harp, Mario Carib on double bass, a new percussionist came in, Irfan Amanda, from Iran, and Aref Gorbani, who's a singer and sitar player.
Yes.
So, and that was the first collaboration with a 7-piece, and we've since been able to get more funding. We've recorded a CD last year, we had a CD launch, and we have a website now. And this year we are bringing in as a guest pianist, Sabar Bamatrov, who I met him and his wife Shatha Altaway, who is a visual artist, and last year she created a back projection for our performance at the Festival of Migration last year. So there's now 9 of us involved.
And I suppose we should people will want to know exactly what the other is as a piece. What can audiences expect?
They can expect music really, really from exceptional musicians, and it is truly a collaborative project where people contribute an idea, and then everyone also starts to contribute work in, brings their influences from their musical background, their culture. And the music is incredibly diverse, moving from traditional Persian styles to very strong Latin feel, because Mario is from Brazil, and of course Jose is from Chile. And with Esther Swift, she is classically trained, but she has a very strong Celtic influence in her playing and her singing. And I forgot to mention Matt Wright on sax and flute and tongue drum. He's a brilliant sax player, great improviser. So there's all these influences. So it can be very upbeat, it can be very moving, and of course we strive to tell the stories of those of us within the band who have experienced forced displacement and had to go through the asylum seeking process as a refugee from their countries of origin.
And Jose, when you became involved, you got your own story, but then you're suddenly learning about other people's stories as well. And was that was there an understanding of other people's stories? Is that part of what the other is about?
Yes, I think I feel like the other this band. I feel it like a kind of place, you know. I feel it like that. I think the music of the other is a kind of the music of everywhere, you know, and at the same time it's our music, you know. It's really interesting, you know, for me. In my case, I am a migrant, you know. I came here because the studies of my wife in this case, but I was so lucky to know people, new people like Ian and other friends as well that have helped me to develop my career here as well. And I don't have the background of a displaced people as a refugee and or an asylum seeker, but I am working as well for an organization that work with refugees and asylum seekers. And that's for me is you can count, you can understand, you know, how privileged we are, and as well what are the common ground that you share with the people, you know, that has been displaced or has been in political problems as well, you know, in their countries. So I feel really privileged to be in both sides, you know. In one side, I work for refugees. I work for organizations that work with refugees and asylum seekers, and on the other side, and I am a migrant that is I am learning, you know, from all these people that are coming from different places, you know. I think the other is more or less share the same point, you know, and the beautiful things about the collaboration in the other as well is all the projects that are around, you know. Each of these musicians that we are sharing have their own projects or run other projects as well that are really interesting, and always is talking about stories, are talking about stories of life, are talking about movement and displacement. So I feel really honored, you know, to be part of this kind of collective, and really honored to work with Ian that has put in place all this, and he's working a lot for basically for us, you know. So that is amazing.
I mean, how did the show come together? Did you start with a single story and then go looking for other people's, or was it a more kind of organic than that?
I would say it is more organic. You know, we have musical ideas as individuals, but then the songs that have been brought, Esther Swift has introduced two amazing songs. One which is in her own style, but there's another one where she has created a song around a poem by Rumi, the Middle Eastern poet.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that kind of collaboration, drawing on different musical influences, and when people bring stuff in, there's a piece that we start, our kind of title piece, The Others, starts off using Taksim, which is a Middle Eastern scale, and as it goes through the different the dynamics of the piece, we end up into a very Latin feel, which Jose would explain more, but it just kind of went that way that, you know, we, as you try to develop a piece, sometimes someone says, oh, how about this?
So there was it sounds like it's almost the term world music is often used, but this does sound like, you know, it's fusing different styles from different parts of the world and bringing them together. Jose, is that kind of how you feel it's developed?
Yes, it's like that. It's exactly like that. For me, it's like this is a really generous space, you know, that we can bring an idea and we develop it together. You know, at some point, there are other people. For example, I remember we have in the repertoire a couple of songs from Esther Swift, and she bring it to us. It's music that is from her that she already got it. She already composed, but she put it there, you know, and we try to make a beautiful arrangement, you know, try to make justice to the beautiful composition, and we do our best, and finally we got a version, you know, the other version of those songs, you know, and I like that, you know, I like that it's collaborative enough, and all of us have the same participation in terms of words, in terms of the opinion, about the music, and that is great. It's beautiful.
And continuing that idea, Jose, there's this stereotypical idea that music is an international language, but do you feel it really is? It can kind of break down barriers and get people, discussing things musically that maybe might be more difficult otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's like that. It's not a common. How can I say? It's a kind of language. I'm not sure if it's a language that all of us we understand the same things through the music. I think the music means different things to each of us. Depends of our backgrounds. But the thing is, for me, is for sure it's a way to communicate something. Something a bit more. How can I say? Mystically, we want to. But there is some common grounds there. There are some common things that we can share with them, and that is the beautiful thing. And the other beautiful thing about that is that mythical or mystical approach, that happened when you are playing with these guys. It's finally starting new projects, in between us, and we are inviting each other to other things, and that is as well very, very beautiful, and that means, yes, something happened there, something about communication, something about language there, and finally you talk a lot, but it's more important to play a lot as well.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. And Ian, we've spoken in these interviews that we're doing a lot about the importance of collaboration in the kind of artistic process. How has it been for you? Surprising, magical, as Jose said. How would you describe the creation of the other, and which is continuing, obviously?
Well, all of these things, it has been surprising and incredibly inspiring. And one of the main important things, I think, especially with other cultures, and when you're working with people who have had experience that I have never had, you've got to listen.
Yeah.
And especially when you're creating music, because space is as important as the actual sound that is being played. And I've learned so much because the musicians of such a high caliber. It's very challenging. And the engagement with people as individuals has really opened my eyes as well. And you get a far better understanding. Unfortunately, we are in a current climate where there's so much fear and rejection of what we call the other. And that's partly why we have used that name, because it's a way of I read a book by a Polish journalist who said that when he traveled, he realized that he became the other, because moving from Poland and then going into Africa and South America, he realized that the other is really, you're looking at a mirror of yourself. All your prejudices and fears about the other people see that in you.
Yeah.
So it's a point of engagement to break down barriers and to try to create a better understanding. And I think music can really do that in many ways.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And it's already been, you've played live already. What's been the reaction from audiences? What's the feedback been like?
It's been amazing. We've had really, really great reception. And we've been lucky. We've had some really good performances at Fringe by the Sea a couple of years ago. We're at Celtic Connections this year, the Festival of Migration last year, and everywhere we play, we get a standing ovation at the end of it. So there's an energy and joy in it, although, the stories and the experience of people who are performers are quite, representing something quite traumatic, but the joy and the energy within the performers and the creativity is just amazing.
I think often gate theatre in particular, or anything that's alive like that, can create empathy that sometimes audiences don't expect to have when they maybe go through the door. and you can change things during that performance. Jose, what have you found in terms of audience reaction? Has that anything surprised you or just uplifted you?
No, yeah, it's amazing. I think it's a it's really it's a motivation. It's a motivation. The reaction of the audience always is beautiful, right? I am really I can't wait for the next for the next show, for the Fringe show that we are preparing, because we are having there the Shada. For example, Shada is a Gemini artist that will be work with us in a thematic that that is related to the to Yemen, to their country, and the uprising of women there. So for example, that kind of thing for me is like important to be there, part of the other, and as well to see what happened with the audience there when it's a political subject, a bit it's a stronger thing. It's a stronger thing, and it's hard as well. It's hard to talk about and so I can't wait to feel that reaction of the audience in terms of that kind of subjects that are a bit more heavy to chew.
Yeah. And in that sense, do performances change? I mean, the other is always kind of developing new stories being told.
Yes, we unfortunately, one of the things is that having such a big lineup and the musicians at such a high caliber, that I always try to make sure there's funding in place so that people actually get paid for their time, because it's unfair to get so much commitment from people and not to reward them. So yes, we try to create situations where we can develop new ideas. At the moment, it's happening online. Someone has an idea, we record it, we put it online so that we can then learn the parts. And when we come together for rehearsals, we then become more creative with the pieces. And as Jose said, Shatha has written some amazing pieces, one about female oppression in Yemen, and the other one is about her journey to Scotland and her how she feels as an immigrant within Scotland, which is a wonderful piece. So we have these dynamics of the emotions and the stories within the ensemble that we're all trying to project in a very positive way. And I think what we do actually highlights the positive contribution that anyone who's an immigrant coming to another country can project. So,
well, it sounds like they're going to be wonderful events. I think it'd be good just to remind people where and when they can see you.
Okay, it's at the Scottish Storytelling Centre on the Royal Mile in Edinburgh, which used to be called the Netherbow. And the dates are the 14th of August, the 15th of August, both of these at 3:15. And on the Friday, the 16th, that one is at 6:45. You can Google the Made in Scotland showcase and follow our link, the other, to ticket sales and get full details of what we're doing.
And I'll make sure on our website there's links for tickets and all the details that you can get for things. Ian and Jose, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate it, and all the very best with Edinburgh and beyond.
Thank you
very much.
Thanks you for having me.
I'm joined now by performance maker Sean Wei Kyun to hear all about A History of Fortune Cookies, which will be at Summer Hall in the former women's locker room from the 1st to the 25th of August at, now this is interesting, 12:15 and 12:50. We'll talk about that in a moment, but first of all, hello, Sean.
Hello, nice to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. So let's explain the 2 times. You're doing 2 shows a day, I take it.
I am indeed, which sounds like a lot, but really, because each show is only half an hour long, it's short form. So I'm basically just doing the 2 back to back. So it's half-an-hour show, and then I have a bit of a break to reset, and then half-an-hour show. So hopefully it will encourage people to come and invest some of their time, but then not too much.
I think that's really quite clever, you know, because there will be people that go, oh, a 60-minute show, can I do that? Whereas this is something people can fit in their lunch breaks if they so wish.
Exactly. I'm very lucky as well to be at the time slot I am, because yeah, it is around lunchtime, and because I will be doing live cooking, it makes complete sense that if you want to come and have a little snack on a show, you can just rock up to Summer Hall.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Well, first of all, you tell us all about the history of fortune cookies, because I've done a lot of these interviews now, and this is unlike any of the other ones I've done. So it'd be interesting to hear your point of view.
Sure. So it's, like I say, it's short form performance. It's an intimate audience as well. So there's a maximum of 10 people allowed per show. And the reason for that is because I will be doing cooking. So the whole conceit of the show, if you want to call it that, is that people will be writing fortunes to go into fortune cookies. Meanwhile, I'll be baking the cookies. And as I bake them, I will then be talking about the history of fortune cookies, and that will be intertwined with some of my own history and some of my own experiences growing up mixed race. And so basically, I can only cook 10 per show. So therefore, it has to be a smaller audience. But I'm hoping, once again, like with the 30-minute thing, that will be another selling point.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting way to tell a story. Why did you want to tell it this way?
I felt like I wanted to use food as a way to engage with people. It's a way to connect with people and to basically excite people. People get excited when they hear that there's going to be an element of food or cooking there. To me, it's one of the great things about performance is the multisensoriness of it, and so having food in there involved in that is just makes complete sense. And when I'm baking the cookies, you'll get that smell and you'll feel the heat and all that sort of thing. And that's a huge part of the story that I want to tell as well, because a lot of the story I want to tell is about my maternal grandparents who were cooks and did work in a takeaway, and so that all those sort of other elements of food and performance, they're important to it and part of it as well. So I'm hoping that it's not just a gimmick; it's actually an integral part of the narrative that I'm trying to tell.
I think it sounds like an incredible way of creating immediate connection with an audience, because you've not just got sights and sounds, but you've got smells and potential tastes and all. I mean, it sounds like it'd be a real kind of sensory experience in that way.
Definitely. I mean, it's only a wee bit of cooking, really, because, like I say, it's just baking cookies. But
Yeah.
even that in itself, I start off with the ingredients and I'm talking about things as I go and how I'm making them, and it's all another entry point. That's if I was just standing there just talking and without cooking, maybe people would lose interest. But hopefully, with the fact that I do have ingredients there, it will actually help connect people more.
Have you done the show already?
No, actually. So I've done a couple of test runs, trial runs, scratches, which have gone really well. I've done other performance work that involves elements of cooking. So I did a show that was all about kneading bread or kneading a dough to try and make a bread. But this will be the first time that it's much more intimate and much more, I'm actually cooking individual things for people in the audience, and I'm really, yeah, excited for it. And also, it is a bit scary thinking that I worked out the other day and I'm going to have to make around 400 500 cookies like for the entire month. So
I used to be a chef, and I know that you're hoping that every one batch will be the same, but you just never know as well. But that's a real kind of, I guess, part of a kind of jeopardy as well.
yeah, and I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why live cooking and watching people cook is so exhilarating, because it's not something that you see every day, and there are elements of it's going to be different every time, and therefore whenever it happens, this is going to be it. Like, it's temporary and it's not going to be the same every single show. So whenever you come, it's going to be individual and personalized to you in some way.
And that personalization, I mean, you did mention it, but just so I'm kind of clear in my head, the fortunes will come from the audience. The what's going inside the cookies comes from the audience.
Yes, yeah. So the idea is that people will be able to write whatever they want, and I don't have to see it. It won't be shared with anyone unless you want to. I basically just wanted people to have something to take away with them. And one of the great things about fortune cookies is that it's a food as well as a fortune. So you have that tasty treat to snack on, but also you can input some of your own language, some of your own thoughts into it, and therefore it becomes a bit more collaborative rather than just me providing everything.
I think again, it feels like something that's wonderfully kind of interactive, because people will be thinking, what have other people written, or there is that kind of bringing of, and having such a small audience is an interesting part of that as well. So, I mean, that I guess is part of the practicalities of cooking on stage. Are there other challenges that you face?
I mean, the whole point of cooking with people or cooking for people live, it's so important, and yet it also definitely adds complications because I have to work through all the performance elements and all the script language elements that I want to discuss and explore. I have to still do that while also making sure the timings are all okay and all the ingredients are okay. And then, having to work with venues and work with different people as to health and safety things as well, and making sure that everyone's aware of all the allergies and everything. So it definitely adds more things for me to think about. And that's been challenging at times, but also super, super rewarding. It's one of the reasons why I'm really interested in doing this sort of thing. And just because it's not easy doesn't mean it's not good.
And in terms of the story you're telling, your own story and your family story, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So my maternal grandparents, they migrated from Hong Kong to the UK in the 40s and 50s and opened up takeaways, like many people in their generation did, because there wasn't much else for them. They didn't have any language skills, they didn't have any formal education behind them. And so really it was through the takeaway food that they were able to make a world for themselves here and make a place for themselves. And they spent the rest of their lives here and really felt like they were part of something here, even if they couldn't speak that language. And yet there's growing up, especially, there was very little representation or exploration in the arts of migrant stories in that way. And so I'm trying to tell some of that story, but because it's so embedded within that element of food, that's where my ideas to have food come into it as well, because it's in some ways, I guess, trying to do justice to their legacy in some small way, and to sort of explore their story, not just through my words but also through some of the actions that maybe they had to go through as well.
And do you think the Asian Scots experience is one that's kind of been overlooked, as you say, perhaps not represented as widely as other people?
Definitely. I think it's one of those things where the whole, I never even the concept of representation never even crossed my mind, because it just seemed impossible. It seemed like, why would the story be told anywhere? Because it's just me. I'm isolated in the world, or maybe I know one or two other people, but no one else is interested in this. And a lot of the times the families themselves are saying like no one else would be interested in this and everything. And it's only really been in the last few years that I think the story has been told more and is being told more, and that those kind of communities are coming together a bit more. And I think that's really positive and really good and long overdue.
I was going to ask if there was anything outside of your family experience that's kind of inspired you to do this show.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've over the last few years, I've become a bit more involved in community organization, especially with like East and Southeast Asian people in Scotland, and having conversations with people and really realizing that it wasn't just me who was feeling this lack of representation, and actually that it was lots of people, and that also that I have a right to tell my story, and that I can tell the story, and that people will be interested and they'll be able to make their own connections. And even if other people haven't gone through those same experiences, there's still ways that they can connect with the elements of not belonging somewhere, or elements of feeling like, you know, you're not in the right place in your life. And so really having those conversations and being part of that wider Scottish, East and Southeast Asian community has encouraged me and helped me so much to just want to tell the story more and feel a bit more empowered to do so.
And again, I think the use of food in the way that you're doing it is particularly interesting, because everyone will be able to understand, no matter where they're from, or the importance of family food and family, and that kind of coming together. Was that something that was, I mean, you've talked about your grandparents working in the business side of food, if you like, but what about at home? Was that an important part of your family upbringing?
Definitely. I mean, food was always the love language. Food was always, you know, the main connective device between all my family members. At the same time, it was very, very, very different food. And so there was, you know, the food that we had that was being sold in the takeaways to other people, and then there was the food that we'd eat as a family, and there was very little crossover there. And that's been one of the things that's really interested me and fascinated me for a long time, because I guess growing up, I kind of felt a bit ashamed of that food that we were selling, because it wasn't real, it wasn't, you know, authentic, it wasn't proper. And yet, you know, talking to other people who ate that food on a weekly, monthly basis with their families, and it was actually really important food for them. You know, it was a way for them to connect with their food and with their wider community. So I want to try and celebrate it a bit more now, I think, definitely.
I mean, I imagine your grandparents in particular will have seen huge changes in the food culture of this country over, you know, from when they started to present day.
Definitely. I mean, I think as far as I know, when they first started the first business, it was still, you know, just basically fish and chips, and that was it. And then it was all slowly, one by one, these more, you know, Chinesey dishes started coming in, and people slowly started accepting that a bit more and experimenting a bit more. And you know, fortune cookies are a really interesting part of that history, I think, because they're American, but also they're sort of Asian, but also they're sort of not, and you know, they don't fit neatly anywhere. And when they first opened their businesses, you know, fortune cookies would have been something that nobody would have had any associations with in this country, really. And yet now everyone in Scotland knows what a fortune cookie is, and most people have had an experience of one.
But that's an interesting part of the history that you're going to speak about, because I had no idea that they were an American, as so many things are an American invention.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different conflicting stories, because these are the type of foods that, you know, the history does get lost, and people don't bother to record the history of foods like fortune cookies. And yet there's some things that we do definitely know, and one of them is, yeah, that it's almost certainly from the west coast of America, and still to this day the largest manufacturer of fortune cookies is an American company based in New York, actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's such a winding story and narrative and history to it.
And we've been talking to people about the collaborative nature of theatre. Could you talk about that for your show?
Yeah, so it's been so incredible to receive so much support from different people, because I've been doing things in the Scottish performance and theatre scenes for, you know, a good few years now. And yet so much of what I do is solo shows. So much of it is my own vision, me bringing it to life. And I might work with a director or a dramaturge or something like that, but I'm not the biggest, I don't make huge productions, so therefore I never have to work with multiple other people, really. And yet I've had so much support from people like National Theatre Scotland and Feral Arts and Summer Hall and everyone. And that's I think really made me feel very lucky and grateful to be part of the scene here, if we can call it a scene, because it is such a such a friendly scene to be part of, and such a great supportive network to be involved in. And I'm just super grateful to be here and to have this opportunity.
And Summer Hall is a great venue. How did you when you found out that was going to be your venue, did you say, by the way, I'm going to be cooking on stage? Or was, and were they, you know, how did that conversation come about? Because I doubt they'll have had much of that previously.
Yeah, so you know, this has all come about because of the Autopsy Award, which is for, you know, more experimental kind of performance work, and I applied for that, saying that I wanted to do cooking, and also that, you know, because I wanted to do cooking, it would have to be smaller scale. And I was actually quite surprised when they said yes to that, because, you know, yeah, like you say, so, you know, it is a bit of a boundary that many venues don't dare to cross because of all the health and safety reasons. And so, yeah, there's been definitely some back and forth in terms of, you know, the rules and regulations around it. But I have to say, they've honestly been really up for it and really just excited in general. And of course, you know, wary of certain cross-contamination style things, but mostly just supportive. And yeah, I think it's one of the reasons why I'm so grateful to be part of their lineup this year.
It's one of these things I can imagine the theatre kind of people side of things going, yeah, this is great, let's do it. And then the kind of manager and the HR folk going, oh no, how have we got to work with this? I think there'll be some interesting conversations there. Have you any plans to maybe after Edinburgh take it elsewhere?
Possibly. I'm not looking too far ahead yet,
Yeah,
because you know,
yeah.
August is going to be long. It's my first time doing a show for this for like, you know, 20, 25, 26 days, and going to do it so often, and so I'm looking forward to having a bit of a break afterwards already. And then after that we'll see where it goes, but I'm very excited to hopefully be able to show it to other places around Scotland in the future.
I mean, the reason I ask is because it seems to me a story that would travel and, you know, would be relevant all over the country, which is it would be interesting, I think. Are you looking forward to Edinburgh? Because you do seem to have set yourself quite the task.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited for it. I have occasional moments where, you know, I I sort of zoom out of myself and I find myself thinking, what have I done? Like, how have I got here and what am I doing? And then the excitement comes back again, because yeah, at the end of the day, it's the reason that I like to work in performance and I like to work in food is because I like to connect with people and I like to tell stories, and to be able to do the Fringe is an opportunity to connect with so many people from all around the world. And, you know, they all come to Edinburgh for this 1 month a year. And I think that's a reason to get over all the doubts and the fears that I have, and just to be like, yes, this is going to be a great month.
Sean, it sounds like an amazing show. We should remind people where and when they can see you.
Sure thing. So it's at the former women's locker room at Summer Hall. Every day in August. There's a couple of Mondays that's not on, but apart from that, you can see it at 12:15 or at 12:50. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you there, hopefully.
Yeah, well, I think I will definitely make it along, because I can't wait to see how this actually kind of unfolds. It really interesting.
And you've got a head start now. You can already start thinking about what kind of fortune you want to write. So
absolutely, yeah, that's a good thought. Absolutely, Sean. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, and all the very best for the Fringe.
thank you so much. Thank you so much.